The morning had started like any other. The sun cast a warm glow over the quiet suburban streets as parents bustled to drop off their children before work. Sarah Jenkins, a young mother in her late 20s, kissed her 2-year-old daughter Emily on the forehead and handed her over to the daycare staff with a smile. Emily clung to her favorite stuffed bunny, giggling as she toddled off toward the colorful play area. Sarah lingered for a moment, watching her daughter settle in, then turned and left, never imagining it would be the last time she'd see her baby girl. Hours later, everything unraveled. Just before lunchtime, one of the caregivers noticed something strange. Emily wasn't with the other children. Thinking she might be napping or playing alone in a corner, they began to search the rooms, calling her name with growing urgency. When they checked the outdoor playground and found nothing, panic set in. The daycare director called the police while staff combed the building, opening closets, storage rooms, even peering under tables and into crawlspaces. Parents were notified, and within minutes, the parking lot was filled with patrol cars, flashing lights, and stunned onlookers. Sarah arrived in a frenzy, heart pounding, and eyes wild. "Where's Emily?" she demanded, her voice cracking with fear. No one had an answer. No screams had been heard, no witnesses had seen anyone leave with a child. One moment Emily had been there, and the next, she was gone. The front door had been unlocked. The security cameras broken. A blurry figure caught on grainy footage, but nothing conclusive. Time slowed. The walls seemed to close in as Sarah collapsed to her knees in the middle of the daycare lobby, clutching the stuffed bunny a worker had found near the sandbox. Her screams echoed through the building, the sound of a mother's soul shattering as the terrible truth began to take root. Emily had been taken. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, each one heavier than the last. Sarah plastered her daughter's face on every light pole, bus stop, and community board she could find. Local news stations covered the abduction, and tips poured in, sightings, strange vans, suspicious neighbors, but none led to Emily. Police interviewed dozens of suspects, including former daycare employees, estranged relatives, and anyone with a criminal background within a 100-mile radius. Still, every lead ended in disappointment. The detectives grew quieter with each passing day, their updates less frequent, their eyes weighed down by helplessness. Sarah refused to give up. She joined online communities of parents with missing children, attended every rally, and organized candlelight vigils in Emily's name. Her home turned into a war room. Corkboards lined the walls with timelines, maps, and photographs. She stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time, convinced she might miss a call, a knock, a miracle. The once vibrant woman slowly unraveled, held together only by the hope that somewhere, somehow, her daughter was still alive. Friends drifted away. Some couldn't handle the weight of her grief, others simply didn't know what to say anymore. Her marriage collapsed under the strain. Her husband moved out 2 years after the disappearance, unable to endure the constant pain and the haunting emptiness that filled their home. Sarah didn't blame him. She barely recognized herself either. Every birthday passed like a cruel reminder. Each year, she'd buy a gift, just in case, and tuck it away in the closet with the others, wrapping paper faded, bows crushed. Emily's case eventually turned cold. The media moved on to newer tragedies, and the world continued turning while Sarah remained frozen in the moment her daughter vanished. She called the police station every month, begging them to reopen the file, to try again. But even they had begun to treat her as a woman chasing ghosts. Still, deep down, Sarah felt it. Her child was out there. Somewhere. And she never stopped looking. 18 years later, the world looked different. The once young mother was now in her late 40s, her hair streaked with gray and her eyes tired from years of searching and sorrow. Life had moved on around her, but for Sarah, time had never truly healed. She had learned to live with the ache, but it never went away. It followed her into every room, every quiet moment, and every dream where she sometimes still saw Emily as she was the day she vanished, tiny, laughing, and full of life. One rainy afternoon, Sarah found herself in a doctor's waiting room. She wasn't sick, just in for a routine checkup she had been putting off. The room was quiet, save for the distant hum of a television and the flipping of magazine pages from the few patients scattered around her. She reached for something to distract herself, pulling a glossy fashion magazine from the stack on the side table. She wasn't interested in fashion anymore, not like she used to be, but anything was better than sitting in silence with her thoughts. She began flipping through the pages without much interest, ads for perfume, articles on skincare, glamorous photo shoots with models she didn't recognize. But then, one image caught her attention. Her fingers froze mid-turn, eyes locking onto the face of a young woman on a full-page spread. There was something about her, something hauntingly familiar. The model was stunning, poised in a flowing gown, her expression confident and serene. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped Sarah's heart. It was her eyes, her cheekbones, the slight tilt of her head. 1,000 memories surged through Sarah's mind like a flood: photos, baby videos, the way Emily used to smile when she was sleepy. The girl in the photo had to be around 20. The age Emily would be now. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the magazine closer, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be? Was it even possible? For a moment, she doubted her own sanity. She had dreamed of finding Emily for so long. Was her mind playing tricks on her again? But no, this felt different. Real. Too real. She looked for a name. And there it was, printed at the bottom in small, italic letters: Alana Rivers, New York-based model, recently signed to an agency after being discovered at a charity event. Adopted as a baby. Searching for her roots. Sarah's world narrowed to those few words. Her heart pounded as if it might burst. Her fingers gripped the magazine so tightly the edges curled. Adopted. Searching for her roots. A young woman who looked exactly like the daughter she lost. The impossible was suddenly staring her in the face from the pages of a magazine. Sarah couldn't move. The magazine trembled in her hands as she stared at the image, her pulse roaring in her ears like a distant storm. The waiting room around her faded into a blur. Muffled voices, footsteps, the buzz of a television, none of it registered. All she could see were those eyes. They were unmistakable. Wide, expressive, with a slight upward slant at the outer corners, just like Emily's. It wasn't just resemblance, it was a mirror. It was like staring at a grown version of the toddler who had vanished from her life 18 years ago. She leaned closer, scanning every detail of the young woman's face. The gentle arch of her brows, the subtle dimple in her chin, the way her lips curved in a smile that felt eerily familiar. Sarah's breath came in short, shallow bursts. She had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways over the years, but none of them prepared her for the shock of seeing her daughter, her Emily, on the glossy page of a fashion magazine, living a life that had never included her. A nurse called her name from across the room, but Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. She was frozen, caught between disbelief and the fragile thread of hope that she had kept alive for nearly 2 decades. She glanced again at the caption beneath the photo: Alana Rivers. The name meant nothing to her, but the words, adopted as a baby, screamed louder than any siren. Sarah's hands clutched the magazine as though it were a lifeline, terrified that if she let go, the image might disappear. She quickly flipped back to the index and scanned for the article. If there was a full feature, maybe it would reveal more. Her eyes locked on it. Rising star, Alana Rivers shares her journey from adoption to the runway. With trembling fingers, she turned to the page and began to read, skimming over quotes and anecdotes, searching desperately for any detail, anything that could confirm what her heart already knew. Born in 2007. Adopted at 2 years old. No records of biological family. Raised in upstate New York. Discovered by a photographer at a charity fundraiser. A modeling agency signed her within months. Alana had always wondered about her origins, always felt a strange disconnection from her past. Sarah read every word like scripture, tears brimming in her eyes. It was her. It had to be her. The pieces fit too perfectly. The timing, the age, the face, God, the face. Sarah's body trembled with a mixture of awe, fear, and a deep, aching love that had never gone away. The impossible had become real. Her daughter, missing, stolen, lost, had been found, not by the police or a private investigator, but in the most unexpected of places, a glossy magazine in a waiting room on an ordinary day. And now, Sarah knew. The search wasn't over. It was just beginning again, with a name. Sarah sat alone in her car in the medical center parking lot, gripping the magazine against her chest like it held her very soul. Her breath came in shallow waves, and her vision was blurred with tears. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there, minutes, hours, but the sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the lot. Her mind raced. Alana Rivers. Adopted as a baby. Raised in New York. 18 years old. It aligned too perfectly. She had to find her. She had to know for sure. Back home, Sarah laid the magazine on the kitchen table with reverence, smoothing the pages as if afraid they'd wrinkle and erase the truth. She snapped a photo of the spread and began researching online. A quick search of Alana Rivers model brought up several recent campaigns. There were Instagram photos, agency listings, even a short video interview. Sarah watched it on repeat. The girl's voice was warm and poised, her mannerisms elegant, but every now and then, when she laughed or tilted her head, it was like watching Emily, grown and alive, speaking through another name. She found an official profile on the agency's website that mentioned Alana's birthdate. Sarah froze again. March 22, 2007. The same day Emily was born. It was no longer just a feeling. It was fact. There was no coincidence that could explain away the birthdate, the eyes, the tiny scar above the left eyebrow, the same scar Emily had gotten when she fell on the porch steps just weeks before she vanished. It was her. It had to be her. But if Alana had been adopted as a baby and had no knowledge of her biological roots, what had happened all those years ago? Who took Emily? Who raised her? Were they still out there? Sarah's stomach twisted at the thought. Someone had stolen her baby and raised her as their own, lying to her, erasing her true identity. And yet, as much as rage simmered beneath the surface, it was love that overwhelmed her. Her daughter was alive. After all these years, she had survived, grown, flourished, and now, maybe, she was looking for the very same truth Sarah had never stopped chasing. Fueled by new purpose, Sarah contacted a private investigator she had hired years ago, one who had since retired but promised he would drop everything if there was ever a lead. She sent him the magazine photo, the agency link, and the birthdate. His response came quickly: "This needs DNA. I can make it happen. Give me a few days." Sarah's heart pounded. She had waited nearly 2 decades for this moment, and now she was closer than she had ever been. But the days that followed were agony. Every hour stretched endlessly, every ring of the phone made her jump. She imagined 100 outcomes, some joyous, some terrifying. What if Alana rejected her? What if she didn't believe her? What if the DNA didn't match? But the truth was too loud to ignore. There were no doubts in Sarah's heart anymore. She knew her child. She had felt her absence in every breath for 18 years. And now, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, she felt her presence again, not in memory, but in reality. 3 days later, Sarah's phone rang just past noon. She had been pacing the living room, her nerves frayed from lack of sleep, her thoughts caught in an endless cycle of hope and fear. She snatched up the phone before it finished the second ring. It was the investigator. His voice, usually calm and measured, carried an unmistakable edge of urgency. "It's her, Sarah," he said. "The DNA confirms it. Alana Rivers is Emily. She's your daughter." Sarah couldn't breathe. The room tilted slightly, and she had to sit down, clutching the arm of the couch as tears poured freely down her cheeks. She had dreamed of this moment, prayed for it, begged for it in the dark, and now it was real. Her baby was alive, grown, out there, and now, finally, within reach. The investigator continued, walking her through the official channels, the lab's confirmation, the chain of custody, the 99.9987% match that left no room for doubt. Sarah barely heard the details. She was too overwhelmed by the flood of emotions crashing over her. Relief, joy, disbelief, and a deep, aching sorrow for the years that had been stolen from them. He explained that they had also identified the woman who had raised Alana. She had used a falsified birth certificate and adoption papers. Her name was Margaret Ellis, a former daycare worker from a nearby town who had disappeared around the time of Emily's abduction. Somehow, she had slipped through the cracks, assumed a new identity, and raised Emily as her own, calling her Alana, and claiming she had adopted her through private means. "She's being brought in for questioning," the investigator said. "They're moving fast now. This won't be swept under the rug." Sarah's hands trembled. Her mind raced through questions, the kind that don't have easy answers. Did Emily, Alana, know? Had she ever suspected the truth? What would she feel when she found out her entire life had been built on a lie? That evening, the police arrived to update her in person. They were gentle, respectful, acknowledging the nightmare she had endured for 18 years. They explained that Margaret had been arrested without incident and was cooperating. She claimed she had saved the child from a bad life, as if that somehow justified everything. Sarah's fury simmered under her skin, but she forced herself to focus on what mattered: Emily. The officers told her that Alana had been informed of the DNA results earlier that day. They didn't share all the details of her reaction, only that she had been shocked, quiet, and overwhelmed. Understandable. She had just learned the woman who raised her wasn't her mother, and that a real mother had never stopped searching. "She wants to meet you," the officer said softly. Those words undid her. Sarah covered her mouth, sobbing into her hands. It was really happening. 18 years of pain, of empty birthdays and unanswered prayers, all crashing into one moment. Her daughter had been found. She was real. And she wanted to see her. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe, not just in hope, but in healing. The sun was just beginning to rise when Margaret Ellis was escorted out of her modest suburban home in handcuffs. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, stunned to see the quiet woman they had known for years suddenly surrounded by law enforcement. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She walked calmly, her expression unreadable, as if she had always known this day would come. Inside the police station, she sat silently in an interview room, her hands folded neatly on the table. She wasn't the picture of a monstrous kidnapper. There was no aggression, no wild eyes, no desperation. But beneath her composed surface was a chilling detachment. When detectives asked her why she took Emily, she simply said, "I wanted a child. I was meant to be her mother." No remorse. No apology. She claimed she had seen Sarah with Emily at the daycare and had been watching them for weeks. She said she'd overheard staff mentioning how tired Sarah looked, how overwhelmed she seemed, and in her twisted mind, she saw it as justification. She didn't appreciate what she had, Margaret murmured, her voice disturbingly calm. "I could give her a better life." When asked how she managed to fake the adoption, she admitted she used old contacts, forged documents, and relocated quickly, changing her name, cutting ties, keeping Emily isolated from anything that might lead her back to the truth. She never enrolled her in public schools for long, moved often, and limited outside contact. Yet somehow, Emily had still flourished. She was always bright, always curious, Margaret said. "I gave her everything. Private tutors, piano lessons, travel. She wanted to model, so I supported her. I loved her. But love built on lies was still a prison." While Margaret sat behind a glass wall of her own making, Sarah prepared for the meeting that would redefine her entire life. Meanwhile, Emily, Alana, was in a separate room with officers and a counselor, processing the unimaginable truth. The woman she had called Mom was not her mother. Her entire identity, her memories, her milestones had been carefully constructed by someone who had stolen her from her real family. She asked to see photographs of herself as a baby, something Margaret had always claimed were lost in a move. When officers showed her photos from Sarah's case file, images of her as a toddler, smiling with her real mother, tears slid silently down her cheeks. There was no denying it. The resemblance was shocking, the truth undeniable. Margaret was formally charged with kidnapping, fraud, and obstruction of justice. She showed no resistance during the hearing, merely nodding as the charges were read aloud. She made no eye contact with Emily as she was escorted away, shackled and silent. Outside the courtroom, the media swarmed, the story already exploding across the internet: fashion model identified as long-lost child in cold case breakthrough. But the headlines didn't matter to Sarah. All that mattered was what came next. The lie had unraveled. Justice had begun. And now, for the first time in 18 years, the truth had a name, a face, and the chance for healing. The door to the quiet, private meeting room creaked open slowly, and Sarah stood frozen just beyond the threshold, her heart beating like a war drum in her chest. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, how Emily might look, what she might say, whether she'd be angry, scared, or happy. But now that it was real, she could hardly breathe. Across the room, sitting nervously on the edge of a padded bench, was the young woman from the magazine. She wore jeans, a pale blue sweater, and her long hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail. She looked up as the door opened, and for a breathless second, the world held still. Their eyes met. It was like looking into a mirror across time. Emily's gaze widened with emotion, recognition, confusion, longing, all playing across her delicate features in an instant. She rose slowly to her feet, unsure, trembling. Sarah took a hesitant step forward, tears already slipping down her cheeks. Her lips parted to speak, but no words came. Her voice caught in her throat, strangled by 18 years of silence and heartbreak. I don't know what to say, Emily said softly, her voice shaking. You don't have to say anything, Sarah whispered. You're here. That's enough. They stared at each other for a long moment, neither knowing how to bridge the chasm of years that had separated them. Then, like gravity pulling planets back into orbit, Emily moved forward. Sarah met her halfway. They embraced, tentative at first, then fierce and full, a mother and daughter rediscovering each other in a way no words could express. Sarah clung to her daughter like she would never let go again. She breathed in her scent, felt the warmth of her skin, and the rhythm of her heart beating against her chest. For 18 years she had imagined this feeling, had held onto it through every sleepless night and every empty birthday. Now it was real. Emily's tears wet Sarah's shoulder as she whispered, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. I know, sweetheart. I know, Sarah murmured, stroking her back. None of this was your fault. They sat together, hands entwined, the silence now comfortable, filled with a mutual understanding that went beyond language. Sarah shared photos from the past, pictures of a chubby-cheeked toddler in overalls, snapshots of birthdays, vacations, quiet moments from a life that had once included them both. Emily studied each one like a piece of a puzzle she'd never known was missing. She asked questions about the day she was taken, about her real father, about who she had been before she was renamed, relocated, and erased. And Sarah answered them all with patience, honesty, and a deep, aching love. Later, when they stepped outside together for the first time, the sky was brilliant with late afternoon light. Reporters waited at a distance, but Sarah shielded Emily with her arm, fiercely protective, just as she had been all those years ago. There would be interviews, investigations, therapy. Healing would not come overnight. But they had taken the first step. For now, they walked side by side toward Sarah's car. Toward the life that might have been, and the one they would begin to build together. And as they drove away, Sarah glanced at her daughter and whispered, "Welcome home." Emily turned to her with moist eyes and a trembling smile. "It's good to be home."